How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode 2 of Tube Squeeze. Now, I should point out that for this recording, I have committed cardinal sin. Yes, that's right. I've done something very unholy, very sinful, very unchristian-like. Before recording, I've put something sticky and icky in my mouth, which is probably not good for recording. Yes, that's right. Before recording, I ate a Nutella sandwich. I know, I'm probably going to hell for committing such vulgar, disgraceful, disgusting sin, but I'll just pray for forgiveness from the voiceover and recording gods, whoever they may be. Probably over Englishman, knowing my luck. Right, so for this episode, I thought I'd talk about how I fell in love with video editing. I've talked about it a bunch before to people on the streams and in Discord, on Twitter, and all this sort of stuff, but I've never actually gone into the ins and outs of why I like it so much. So I thought I'd do that. I thought I'd give a little brief introduction as to how I found it and why I like it, things I maybe don't like about it, and other little tidbits that have to do with it. Now, I first found it when I went to college. I went to college to do a course in media production, a BTEC media production course. I essentially went there because I thought, hey, I like writing, but there's not too much money in it. Maybe I'll do a media production course, and maybe I can work in media production. Maybe I can work in the television or film industry, and maybe I'll make my money writing for those sorts of things. And I went into the media production course, and we had an editing course. And I didn't really know all that much about video editing. You know, I knew what it was, obviously, but I didn't know any of the ins and outs. I didn't know any of the names of the programs. I just didn't know, despite the fact it was 2016, and I was, fairly heavily involved in watching a shit ton of YouTube, a shit ton of creators, and all this sort of stuff. So things like Premiere Pro, Vegas, and all this sort of stuff probably would have come up, but I obviously wasn't paying too much attention up until this point. But I went into the course, and when we got to the part of the course where we were actually learn video editing, the tutor we were given was a bit of a knobhead. He was very absent very often, and when he was in the class, he didn't do jack shit, really. He didn't teach us much, despite the fact that we had like a fucking assignment that was to do with our final grades that he would have to have taught us something to do with the editing for us to even fucking pass. So, yeah, he wasn't great. It literally took... I was the student representative of our course, and I would go to, the student council meetings and stuff. I got people several times in our course telling me that I need to bring this up with the head shooter of our course. It was actually a good, decent bloke who did a lot of work. Literally, we only had one shooter who didn't seem to actually give a shit. We had incidents where the head shooter would be like, "Oh, where's so and so?" and we would be like, "We don't fucking know." And occasionally one or two of us would pipe up, like, "Does it really matter? He doesn't do anything when he's here anyways." And the head shooter would storm out of the room going, "For fuck's sake," or something to that effect. And we actually had to get the higher ups to essentially punish him and fucking discipline him, and he was sent on to some sort of course to be a better college tutor, which is embarrassing for that guy. The shitty part about all that is that whilst he was away, we were given a substitute teacher who actually gave a shit, who not only was trying to tell us all sorts of things about video editing and get us to do things that was actually interesting, cool, and fun. And he was not only was he a great, fun person to get on with, and we actually all of us liked and loved to talk about, and we all got on really well with him. He actually wanted to set up a script writing club within the college that was optional, and all of us, and I mean every single person, wanted to do it. Even the people in the class who I would have thought would be like, "No, I've got better things to do, fuck this, fuck your education," kind of thing. Even they wanted to do it, but unfortunately the shitty tutor came back when right when we were getting around to setting it up and everything, which sucked. But I guess what the weird thing was that the tutor who was supposed to teach us editing, who was supposed to get us to be better at it, wasn't even the one who introduced us to editing software. That was the head tutor. He introduced us to Premiere Pro, which was on every single computer in that room, in the 2 rooms that particular course had available to them as a department. And literally upon opening up Premiere Pro, I looked at it and thought, oh, this looks cool. This looks neat. And then he taught us about what the different values mean and how to mess around with them, and like that the best way to learn the software is to just take any old footage and just mess around with different effects and different properties, different values, and just see what does what. And in the literal act of doing it, I don't know why, but I found it weirdly cathartic and enjoyable. Like, I found it super engaging to just like be able to take a piece of video, slap it on a timeline. The timeline, because of how Premiere works, would automatically mean that the video you would output it to would correlate to the settings of the first thing you put into it, unless you went and changed the settings, the sequence settings. I'm trying to. This is the problem. I'm trying to get us explain different parts about video editing without getting too technical, without boring anyone, because this isn't a tutorial about video editing. It's just why I like it. But I found the act of like doing stuff like changing scale and rotation and keyframe animations and all this sort of stuff, I found it enjoyable. And still to this day, it's hard for me to explain why. It's a weird thing where my brain just clicks, and I just find something so enjoyable about the very literal act of doing it. And it's very hard for me to convey why, because even there's parts of it myself where I don't know why. I'm not really someone who gravitated towards numbers at all. I was fairly shit at math. I still am. I want to buy that fucking Kawakashi, I don't know what the name, the Japanese Nintendo doctor who makes you good at math and shit. I want to buy that game for the Switch because I had that on the DS back in the day and then never touched it. But I'm at a weird age where I'm like, yes, no, I want to do adult things. I want to do stuff to make brain work better. But yeah, numbers was not really a thing that I gravitated towards, which is weird because video editing has a lot of numbers in it. It has a lot of like time calculations and a lot of the values that you use to determine how your stuff looks in video and audio as well is dependent on numbers rather than words. But what I figured out is that I could just, I haven't really been I haven't needed to do this. I haven't found the need to do this, but like if there was like a time where like math were being needed, I could just pull up the computer's calculator. Even though I mostly just work off how things just look on the screen rather than the actual number of the values that I'm changing. So I didn't worry too much about that. I'm still bad at math. At some point I will get better. But I thought I'd talk about like the different things I first started making when I started liking video editing. The first thing I made with opening Premiere Pro, other than just messing around and getting to grips with the software, learning what goes where and how does what and all this sort of stuff, the first thing that I made was we were given an assignment where the purpose of the assignment wasn't really much to do with video editing. We did have to edit the video, obviously, at the end of it, but the main objective of the assignment was to learn about continuity in filmmaking, where the assignment was, okay, here's a pack of playing cards, film a poker scene. And the entire point of the continuity thing is to know what cards go where, like between shots, like how many chips have been put in, how many chips a player has before and after putting in, and all this sort of stuff. And, all different little factors to do with that. And that's how we were graded on that particular assignment. And obviously the thing that I made was, well, pretty much what most of us made. No, scratch that. Pretty much what all of us made was the very obvious, very typical, cringy film student cliches of like poor execution, of trying to make a thing look cool and epic when it really wasn't. I am definitely guilty of that because in my scene, I pretty much just like, because we had to like play a lot of our own characters as well as like film it ourselves, just for the sake of like getting the best people to hold the cameras, and who would be the best people to hold the cameras and all this sort of stuff. And as some people might have guessed from how stupid and over-performative and purposely dumb that I try to make myself whilst being on camera, I kind of lent a bit into that, but I was still not used to being on camera, so it comes across as me trying to be genuinely a good actor when I wasn't. So yeah, I ended up being in the filming of my own assignments and all that sort of stuff, rather than just handling the camera and just telling other people to do things. Because I mean, hell, I do YouTube and Twitch. I guess I was a narcissist from day one. But yeah, I use like I very much try to make that thing like look edgy and cool. I use the Massive Attack song Angel, pretty much the entirety of it. Just look up. You've probably heard that song. If you don't know it by name, look it up. You've probably heard it in films before. Mostly like Guy Ritchie and maybe Quentin Tarantino's put it in a film. I don't know. Probably more likely it's something Guy Ritchie would have used because it's a very UK-based artist. And when I got the actual, like, when we were done with the bullshit, like, part of, like, the filming and all that, when I got my hands on the footage and started editing, I had fun adding shit that was just totally unnecessary. Like, I fucking, like, put the black bars to make it look like a cinematic widescreen thing, and I did that by literally making I exported a 1920 by 1080 just black image. Like just a fucking rectangle of black, and that was it. And then I put it into Premiere Pro and put like 2 copies of it over the footage and like made it look like what roughly I thought were the dimensions to make to give the black bars in cinematic like stuff. And obviously the values weren't accurate, they weren't completely correct, but you know, it gave off the feel I was going for, I guess. And then after that, the next thing I edited was actually the first project of my own that I edited. That was entirely for my own, not for like any college assignment or anything. And that was the Witcher 3 video. The Witcher 3 review. That awful, terrible, horrible video that I've wanted to delete from the main channel many times. And the reason I haven't is purely because friends of mine have told me not to. Like, friends of mine had told me, word for word, verbatim, that they would be upset if I did so much as unlist the video. Now, as far as I can tell, they're not being like sarcastic assholes who are like, no, I ironically enjoy this, it's a terrible video that I love to watch, keep it up so I can keep watching this terrible video. But they've been like genuine, like, nah, it's a good video for like a first video on YouTube and first content creation thing. I kind of agree with them on that, but at the same time, I still really just want to delete it. But at the same time, I suppose I shouldn't, because there's a part of the reason why I haven't is just like looking back on my own videos and like looking for my own fuck-ups as just sort of like key spot moments where I can look to my own fuck-ups and failures and go, okay, don't do that again, otherwise it'll turn out like this piece of shit. But yeah, that's the thing of like why I haven't deleted it, because as much as I want to, people have told me not to. And I guess in my brain, logically, it works if I were to, like, just keep it up as a live example of my own failures to look back and go, hey, don't do that. And I guess, yeah, for what it's worth, for a first ever video on YouTube, it could have been worse. I still don't think it's a good video even for a first video, but it could have been worse. Like, one thing that haunts me to this day is the weird audio glitch. I don't know what timecode it's in, but there's a part where I show like fucking elephant PNGs with fucking Empire, not the fucking Eiffel Tower from France, just on them, and they're just supposed to like stampede like from left to right across the screen, very poorly. I didn't even add like any kind of like dust and like effects of them like being kicked up from the elephant stampeding or anything. Like fucking, I wish I'd thought of that, but I like my brain back then was like, oh no, I can't do that because I would have to make it from scratch and I wouldn't know how to do that, and I'd have to, you know, I overthought how I would actually be able to do a thing. I didn't think I could just look up a green screen on YouTube to just download and key out the green and then that smash it in and that would look okay-ish. But yeah, I didn't even do that. But there's a thing in that where the audio of the elephant noises not only is fucking low quality and awful, But also, there's a weird thing where, like, you hear like a pip, sort of a like noise of like the first like little note of an elephant's like noise, and I don't know why to this day that happened. I have no idea why. It's not like I was like taking like a random section of an MP3 and like slotting in. Like, that was the very beginning of the MP3 that I found to put into the video. So still no idea why that happened, but that's something that I hopefully will never happen to me again. But I guess as to why I love video editing still, I've said before about the weird cathartic feeling I get from the literal act of doing it. But there's also things like the being able to make my own footage and recordings look better and better experiences to watch with very simple like tweaks, edits, and effects. Like, you don't have to go overboard, even though I love going overboard with editing a lot. But you don't have to go overboard to make something not just presentable, but enjoyable to watch. Like, you don't have to like do all sorts of like crazy effects and transitions and all that sort of stuff. You can do very, very simple stuff and still have it be very engaging, you know, still keep your eye and all this sort of stuff. You don't have to like go off the wall to make something enjoyable to watch from an editing perspective. You know, you can do some very, very simple things to make something very enjoyable. I also love people giving me things to edit, because not only do I enjoy the act of doing it, but when people respond positively to what I've done, to what is essentially part of their craft or part of their own efforts to make something good, when people respond positively to what I've done to their footage, to what I've altered, to what I've cut out, what I've left in, what I've emphasized or whatever, I love that. I love getting positive feedback from people who, like, I've done editing for, or like I've done editing with their stuff. I especially love it nowadays because sometimes I'm paid to do it. That in of itself is like, I heard throughout all my like childhood and teenage years, like, oh, if you do something, if your job is something you love, you never work a day in your life. And that's not strictly true, because editing is a job, and I can feel it being a job because, you know, it's software, it's a piece of machinery, it's gonna fuck up, and things aren't gonna work out the way you want it to. But part of why I like it is also there's a weird kind of like problem solving to do with it that it's just super engaging to me. It's very hard to explain to people who maybe aren't video editors and, you know, maybe don't have similar experiences with this kind of like stuff, with these kinds of feelings towards doing something, because obviously there's also the go-to very obvious thing of like, I love making creative stuff. I love putting creative ambitions into my own work, but also being able to, you know, reflect some of that in other people's work that they've paid me to do, you know. Obviously, like, you know, I won't be like, I'm not the type of person to be like, if somebody paid me to do an edit, I wouldn't be like, no, I'm right, this is the better way to do it, I'm not going to edit the thing to the way you want me to. No, because if I'm being paid to do it, they're the client is right, even if they're like technically wrong in something, like say they use like some sort of terminology incorrectly, or say they mix up the names of like different properties or values or whatever, like even if they are on a technical like level wrong about something, what they want and what their videos should be, they are in the right, because it's ultimately at the end of the day, it's their video, because they are paying you to just edit it for them. So there is that. But the parts of video editing I actually don't like, there are very few. The one thing I don't like that I found out on my own was I don't like doing the subtitles captioning thing for like an entire video. Like every once in a while or something, yeah, that's fine, no problem. But like for an entire video, I did not like the first and only time I've done it so far. And that was with a stream highlights on my second channel of the Dragon Ball FighterZ stream I had like with Neclo, Volk, and Darklaw ages and ages ago. And I did not like doing the subtitling part. But to be fair, I've since learned things since doing that would have made doing that video a hell of a lot easier and a hell of a lot more enjoyable. But at the time, I was just sort of caught up in the, oh, I have to pick right fonts, I have to put them in the right places so I'm not obscuring anything that people want to be looking at on the screen whilst it's happening, and I have to, you know, make them all look not absolutely horrible and ugly, and, like, you know, make sure they're legible and all this sort of stuff. And at the time, it was just, like, something that I felt like I had to do for the sake of trying to emphasize the comedic bits of the video rather than something I wanted to do. But nowadays, I've actually found that Premiere has a built-in thing where I can just highlight text graphic segments in a sequence, fucking press one shortcut and brings up a window, and I can change all the fonts of the things I've selected to a specific font if I wanted to. That would have been helpful to have known about back then. But another thing I don't like about video editing is, like, purely on a me trying to do complicated or intense edits on this laptop. This laptop it's seen better days. It's not like on death's door, I'd say. It's still got a lot of life in it. I might need to, like, replace the battery in it at some point. But other than that, it's got a lot of life in it. And trying to do complicated and intense edits on this piece of shit can be really frustrating, because you could, like, do it and it'll look fine, and you can play it and, like, render it in the timeline fine, and play it back in the playback, and it'll work fine. But then you go to export, and then you get the error window of Premiere cannot fucking process these frames in this like time frame, and it'll tell you where, and you go, fuck, I have to figure out how to do this without switching to software encoding, because hardware encoding is great if you're like my laptop and you've got like a fucking like a proper graphics card in there. Like, this thing has a fucking like 1050 in it, which is not bad for a laptop, especially considering I spent $1,000 on it in like 2016, 2017, I can't remember when, but it's not that bad at all. So for what it's worth, this laptop's good. But when it comes into problems like that, at first I was like, oh great, now I have to highlight a specific section and like highlight the entire video and render it in software encoding just to make sure it works, which takes fucking decades compared to hardware encoding and all this sorts of stuff, and it's like awful. But then I found out little things you can do to circumvent that, like highlight the specific section that's causing you issues, make that its own sequence, export that, and then take that export back into your main sequence, or hell, copy the main sequence and put it into and do all that sort of stuff. Either way, I found workarounds for that, but it is always annoying when that crops up, and it's purely because of my hardware. And the second I get better hardware, issues like that will not necessarily disappear entirely, because Premiere and After Effects are notoriously, After Effects more so, but they're not 100% stable. After Effects definitely fucking isn't stable 100% of the time. But, you know, that's kind of the nature of, that's just a bit of nature of technology, I guess, more rather than any kind of like nature of video editing. Although it is nature of video editing, because you need better hardware to be able to do stuff that's more intense and more complicated better, and for it be able to have the software understand what the fuck you're doing, you need a better machine. So it kind of is the nature of video editing. But either way, it's just something like, you know, a typical thing of like, hey, I want to run races. Well, you're gonna need a fast car. Oh, fast car costs money. You know. The only other thing I guess I don't like about video editing is trying to replicate specific effects that I've seen other people do that I either don't have the software or the know-how or can't find out how to do so. There was an edit that that hasn't gone live and like sort of essentially got cancelled. I was working with a friend, and I was trying to replicate a thing in another video I saw, and I could do it, but for some reason, well, basically the person who made the video that I watched that I got inspired by used Sony Vegas. I don't know what version, because I've never touched Vegas. It looks ugly and horrible. I don't think I ever want to touch it. Premiere has a better layout and is easier to comprehend just from looking at it. That's primarily why I don't ever want to touch Vegas. I might in the future just for the sake of it, but I'd rather not relearn another piece of editing software at this point in my life that I pretty much need for a job. But yeah, I wanted to replicate an effect, And I could do that effect in Premiere Pro. No, that's not right. I couldn't do it in Premiere Pro. I could do it in After Effects, but for some reason, that specific effect is named differently in After Effects than it is in Sony Vegas. So I got like, and I knew it was Sony Vegas because I asked the guy, hey, how do I replicate this effect? What software do you use? And he's like, oh, Sony Vegas, it's called this. And After Effects and Premiere Pro do not have the thing that it was called. So I could do it, but it took me going to a mate of mine called Sedge, who does a lot of editing for game theorists, film theorists, very intensive, a lot of constant editing work for the, on those channels. But he edits for those guys. And I asked him, how do I do this effect? He's like, oh, you can do that using turbulent displacement, I think it was. Which I could do, but obviously it was a different name than the water effect or whatever it was in Sony Vegas. So, yeah. And also there's the things of like when I want to do specific effects, but I need like another entirely like different software to even be able to do. Like if I wanted to make the GLaDOS voice from recordings in Portal, if I was to do that, I would need like a software like Melodyne Studio, which is like fucking 700 euros, fucking like 650 pounds, however much it costs. Stupid high expensive piece of software. I have realized the kind of irony of saying that this software is stupidly expensive whilst I am actively paying an Adobe subscription. Haha, irony. Except not, it's just stupidity. Adobe, hey Adobe, you overcharge for your garbage. But yeah, there's things like that. That's one of the things that I don't like doing. Whereas like, oh, I have an idea, I want to do this effect, and I go onto YouTube and I try to find out how to do it, and every single tutorial is like, yeah, to do this effect well, you're gonna want this piece of software that costs a stupid amount of money that you want to do for one effect that maybe you'll do in other videos later. Yeah, no. Yeah, I'm not paying that amount of money to do this one thing. That's nah. I can't justify that on any level because I'm just not that financially well off. But yeah, that's another thing. And as for places I went to learn more about editing, other than like the few bits that I learned in college, I would have learned more had I not had that one shit tutor. But the other places I went for After Effects, my main introduction to that was my college's graphic design tutor, who would come up to us and get us to every now and then make stuff in After Effects, and that was cool and fun. Other than that, YouTube and the internet as a whole has been great. Fucking find editing forums, even if it's on Reddit or whatever, go do that. But there are specific places I can name as well, like Cinecom.net. That's a YouTube channel with a shit ton of Premiere tutorials. They also have a smaller channel called Premiere Basics. If you're just starting off and you like to learn stuff to do with Premiere Pro, that is a fucking perfect place to go. If you're willing to spend a bit of money and get pretty much everything you could possibly want for editing under the sun, whether it's Premiere, After Effects, or audio, or anything like that, Skillshare, yes, it's a premium thing. Yes, it costs money, but fuck me, is it worth it? And Geordie, the guy who runs Cinecom.net, actually has whole ass courses to do with Premiere Pro and After Effects and all sorts of stuff that are fucking amazing. So I highly recommend that. And other than that, you can obviously do the usual YouTube searches. There are plenty of, too many for me to name, but there are plenty of other YouTube channels who do shitloads of tutorials and how-tos with effects and making things do stuff on programs and all that sort of stuff. So, there are lots of free options for you. Another way I learned how to do editing was by my mate that I mentioned earlier, Sedge. I found his small YouTube channel through a guy called Sugar Wolf, and I became friends with him. I've done editing for him in the past, and he's taught me a shitload of stuff, and I fucking love that boy to bits. He's a good lad. Love that man. But yeah, I learned a lot from him, from getting advice and all sorts of stuff from Sedge. He has been an absolute masterclass in help, but mostly with Premiere Pro and a good bit in After Effects as well. Now, part of why I like video editing so much as well, again, is because I love making content on the internet in all sorts of forms, but video is probably the one I like making the most. And what I intend to do with video editing is just essentially keep making content and improving as much as I can and as often as I can, making more impressively edited content, making simpler edited content, and getting it put out more often. Like, that's a lot of like what I want to do with it from like this stage on, I guess you'd say, because that's the part of it where I'm like, this is something that I could have me like infinitely, well, almost infinitely improved and constantly updated, and constantly find new and smarter and better ways to get how you want to happen on the screen happen better and happen faster and happen easier with more flexibility and more, you know, all sorts of stuff like that. Like that's another reason why I massively like this, because it's not like a thing of like where you are limited by the scope of your brain. If you just know how to get to where you need to get to, if you just know which softwares can do what, which parts of which softwares can do what, then you can make it happen on the screen. You just got to learn how. And I guess this is where I talk about the editors who have actually inspired me in video editing. I guess the main ones would have to be Kadikarus, Tear of Grace, Thaf9, every single editor The Right Opinion has ever hired, Finzar, This Guy Edits, Nick Robinson, Super Eye Patch Wolf, Codex Entry, and Leonardo De Sidci, otherwise known as Sidcourse. Like, all those guys, fucking phenomenal editors. Like, even if they're like not doing like all that complicated or like all that overtly like, you know, intense editing stuff, like they all do different things to a different effect. Like Kadikarus and Tear of Grace would primarily do edits that aim towards emphasizing comedic moments or making comedic moments in their own right through editing. Whereas people like Thaf9 and any editor The Right Opinions hired, they're more for like conveying information in a slick, like very impressive way. And like people more like Nick Robinson, Super Eye Patch Wolf, and Sidcourse and Codex Entry, they would be more towards like presenting the feelings and emotions of whatever they're covering and like conveying that information through the editing, and that shit's fucking gold. That shit I love to look at, especially Sidcourse's like Berserk video, the last video he did, assuming he doesn't upload anything whilst I'm recording this. But things like that, they're gold. I love. But on that note, if there's any YouTube channels or any like filmmakers anywhere on the internet that I can look at, if there's any people that I can look at their edits and fucking have a weird editing wank over it, by all means, let me know somewhere, either in the comments or like in the Discord, or tweet at me. It's like, hey, this guy does really impressive shit, follow him. I'll be like, I fucking will, thank you. Seriously, because I really appreciate that. The more inspiration and the more like content creators who know what the fuck they're doing and make impressive shit that I follow, hopefully the better off I will become in doing things, because either I'll be able to interact with them, or I'll look at them and thought, oh, I'd never thought to put that effect with this effect and layer it like this and all this sort of stuff. Like, fucking tell me about that shit, because I want and need to know. But yeah, I guess the only thing I would ask of you guys is there anything that you guys do that give you the same kinds of feelings, the same kinds of joys and highs and lows that editing does for me? Let me know. You know, I'd be interested. You know, we could have a nice little conversation about that. If you'd like to ask a question of me, or if you'd like to propose a topic for me to talk about in these videos, you can either leave it in the comment, tell me on Discord, tell me on Twitter, or you can just email me if you would like to do it anonymously. You can email me at tubesqueeze@protonmail.com. This has been Dominic. This has been the second episode of Tube Squeeze, and I'll see you guys next Sunday.